Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition, and we turned out to poem 551, There is a Shame of Nobleness. You will maybe recall when we played the game of 444. This will take us back just a little bit to our earlier study. And what is it that we read there about shame? Well, she says it this way: it feels a shame to be alive when men so brave are dead, when envy's the distinguished dust permitted such a head. The stone that tells defending whom this Spartan put away what little of him we possessed, in pawn for liberty. The price is great, sublimely paid. Do we deserve a thing that lives like dollars must be piled before we may obtain? Are we that weight sufficient worth that such enormous pearl as life dissolved before us in battle's horrid bowl? It may be a renown to live. I think the man who die, those unsustained saviors, present divinity. Now, one scholar, priestess, called this poem a crescendo of self-abnegation. And I'm going to challenge us to maybe think about why you would say that about this poem. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down the left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. Hopefully you've worked through our set of introductory comments, as well as our preceding 550 poems. We just finished with 550, I Cross Till I Am Weary. Now, I want you to notice in this poem the progression of the different types of shame. First of all, there's the noble man who gets money and feels kind of ashamed because does one really need money? Then notice there will be the question of ecstasy when it arrives in a person's life, and maybe you feel a little guilty about that or shameful about that. Third, there will be the people who compliment a brave individual for his being brave, and in some way that troubles a brave person, as if he's calling attention to himself, being brave, so that when we'll talk about bravery. And then finally, after all of that, there's the question of immortality, the flood question, as we've referenced it in so many of our earlier lectures. Why? Because the individual who receives immortality maybe doesn't quite deserve it. Hey guys, we could make the argument that the greatest poet we've ever read at the psychological level is Dante. Yes, we've given full lectures of the Divine Commedia there. But we could say the same thing of Homer and Virgil. But it seems at times Emily surpasses all of them in a little offering like this. It's quite remarkable. Let's enjoy it. There is a shame of nobleness confronting sudden pelf, a finer shame of ecstasy convicted of itself. A best disgrace a brave man feels acknowledged of the brave. One more, ye blessed to be told, but that's behind the grave. Leave it to Emily to say behind the grave and not beyond the grave. It's a genius construction. Behind the grave? What do you mean behind the grave? Oh, okay, I get it. And no doubt she's channeling Dante in much of this poem. First of all, to talk for a few seconds about the use of the word shame. When we did 444 earlier in our study, I ran down this list of all the poems that include shame. 295, 313, 412, 473, 486, 551, 725, 969, 1274, 1304, 1412, 1427, 1683. All of these treating the challenges of the shame one can feel and the different types of shame. But notice she's joining the word shame with the idea of nobleness. In other words, somebody who is virtuous, somebody who has lived a good life, feels in some way compromised or ashamed of the life. When? When could that even possibly happen? Well, the first one is when one confronts sudden pelf. Now, pelf here takes us back to our study of Chaucer, doesn't it? You'll remember that in the Pardoner's Tale, that the pardoner, the hypocrite pardoner, says that he loves to preach sermons that free the pelf. Here it's about money or riches, right? And it kind of happens suddenly. Emily, of course, never knew this kind of experience because she never tried to publish her stuff the way, for example, Walt Whitman did, and he struggled, obviously, with having his stuff published and making enough money at it. But if all of a sudden a bunch of wealth comes on a noble person, they can feel kind of a little sense of, did I deserve this? Do I really deserve this? there is a second, or what she calls a finer shame. Notice she goes from finer to best. A finer shame of ecstasy. By the way, she loves this word. She uses it in 27 of her poems. Convicted of itself. I think convicted is the key word of this poem. In other words, we start to feel like maybe we don't deserve the ecstasy or the great feeling of love or adoration that we receive, maybe. And then from finer, we go to best. Best, notice, it's no longer shame, it's disgrace. That a brave man feels acknowledged of the brave. In other words, when some kind of individual has done something really brave, often a truly noble person doesn't want anybody to talk about it. Let's just leave it alone, leave it alone. She says, if there is celebration of the individual, he can feel a certain kind of disgrace. Why? Because he wants to be simply virtuous without having the virtue called out. Once the virtue of courage is called out, it somehow diminishes the capacity. I mean, reading this, we can't help but think of somebody like Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, right? Then, after that, there's one more, dash. Ye blessed, dash. Now, notice ye blessed is in quotation marks because she's quoting Matthew 25:34. Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of this world, right? This idea of in one's passing, one receives the great gift, right? And then to be told that you are blessed. But that's behind the grave, on the other side, which seems to suggest that maybe even in the nobleman's death, he still is not quite sure that he deserves or she deserves the award, the reward of that, what Revelation 3:16 calls the crown of life, and she'll play that game several times as well. What do you think is the primary message here? I think one of them is that it's hard to accept blessings sometimes, to receive blessings or to receive some kind of gift and to not feel like somehow you're really not worthy of it. It's hard. I love this progression. Notice we go from money to heaven itself. At 3:8, well, we mentioned Dante's Divine Commedia. From Inferno to Paradiso is brilliant. And again, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Now, we're going to come back to this idea when we hit a couple of poems. When we get to 969, she'll say it this way. He who in himself believes, fraud cannot presume. Faith is constancy's result, and assumes from home. Cannot perish, though it fail every second time, but defaced vicariously for some other shame. And then when we get to poem 1412, she'll play the game this way. Shame is the shawl of pink in which we wrap the soul, to keep it from infesting eyes, the elemental veil, which helpless nature drops when pushed upon a scene, repugnant to her probity. Shame is the tent divine. What a brilliant line. Shame is the tent divine. Finally, to own a poem like this, what was a time in your life when you received some kind of accolade or gift and you didn't feel worthy, and yet you somehow were really happy that you got it? I hope your study of Emily is that kind of gift. Thank you.